we've had to rejig where we're doing this month's Love Talk. And Love Talks is a monthly conversation I have with industry experts with the sole goal to help you expand, awaken, and deepen your love life. And this month, I have Cam Fraser joining me from, Cam, where are you? Perth?
Yeah, Perth, Western Australia.
Yeah. And Cam is going to be sharing some of his wisdom, which actually I discovered on Instagram. And we're going to be having a discussion around gender and personal power. And as I posted earlier today, to be blatantly honest, this discussion is really about sex and our personal power. So without further ado, I want to dive in because we're starting a little later. But Cam, before we do that, I'd love for you to share your background in this realm. I know you're a sexologist and you do yoga-based sex therapy for people. You do a number of workshops throughout the year and one-on-one work. Can you tell us a little about your own journey and how you came to be doing this work?
Yeah, of course. So all kind of started, actually, I studied over in America, and I studied in Georgia, actually, the deep conservative South. And being an Australian coming over from, a relatively liberal, laid-back kind of lifestyle to be in the deep South was a bit of a culture shock for me. And really, the thing that was the most of a culture shock was the lack of sex education. That was really confronting to me. My sex education wasn't amazing, but it was still, I guess, more comprehensive than what was being offered to, college level students, college age students, 16, 17, 18-year-old, teenagers that really needed the education. So that's what kind of sparked my interest in human sexuality. And at the same time, I was studying psychology. I was also studying philosophy, and I was really interested also in bodywork and the somatic side of things as well. So I always knew that I wanted to bridge the gap between psychology and physiology. So the best tool for that, for me at least, was yoga. So I had a whole personal practice that I'd been building and refining over a longer period of time, and I decided to pursue that and become a teacher. And really, I wanted to try and integrate yoga with sex ed. That was really what I wanted to do. So over the years, I've started offering that in one-on-one sessions, as well as offering workshops around it, using the word tantra to kind of draw people in. But really, it's a yoga class with a lot of sex ed weave throughout it. So we talk a lot about things that are happening kind of for our bodies, the way anxiety affects us, the way maybe society and culture affects us as well, and how that can be integrated or can misalign our sexuality and our sexual expression. So it's been a bit of a journey, a couple of years, different avenues, but I really try and bridge that gap, I suppose, and try and bring those two worlds together: the Western medicine, medically accurate world, and the spiritual, esoteric, yogic, tantric side of things as well. So I really like to bring those two worlds together because I think they're really important to have a fundamental understanding of both if you're going to dive into this work.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I know when we talked before, it makes so much sense, especially on this specific topic, because I would think that the imbalance or misunderstanding or disconnection from your own understanding of what your personal power is as it ties into your sexuality happens when you don't have an understanding of those two things, especially when we're so conditioned culturally, men in particular, with regards to having a sense of almost entitlement outside of really what your realm of personal power is. That they're raised to be thought of in a certain way, and that actually the beauty of connection in sex gets lost. So the whole reason why we started this conversation, and I want to share it, and anyone that's watching, I'm going to let you know that there might be some language that you might not agree with, but I think it's important that we have the freedom to speak in a way that really shares what we're needing to get through in a way that is to the point. So the post that originally you shared, Cam, that really resonated with me because you were talking about really what having a cock means. And you run through 3 points. One, in having a penis or a cock, that you're not just that you are a human being beyond that. Even beyond that, spiritually, you're a spiritual being beyond that. And not everybody has a cock or a penis or likes them. And that's not a good or necessarily a bad thing. And being born with one, and I quote here, or identifying with that fact, in this particular society, you'll be privy to certain things that people that don't have cocks or identify with them will not be privy to. And I really want this conversation to come around, starting with number 3 and then working back into 1 and 2 about what that really means. So what inspired you to actually have that conversation? Because when I found it, it was amongst a lot of anger that was happening, understandably, on social media right around the time that Dr. Ford gave her testimony. And it was, for me, a wonderful thing to see that a man in particular was coming in and talking about personal responsibility. Can you speak to that a little bit more for us? And I'm not sure, we're getting quite a bit of feedback on sound. I'm not.
Yeah, that's my fault. I've just pulled over to the side of the road. I was volunteering this morning, so I'm in the warehouse area, unfortunately. So I've just got trucks and stuff driving past. Hopefully people can hear me.
Yeah, we're getting horrible feedback,
Um,
so we'll make do.
well, I'll try and speak in between the trucks that are driving past. Um, yeah, I suppose the whole premise for writing that post, we didn't, obviously I'm based in Australia, we didn't get too much, at least in my personal social media feed, I didn't get too much coverage or the vitriol and the anger that was coming through because of the Dr. Ford and Brett Kavanaugh situation. But really, this was on me taking really ownership of being a man. You know, everything I see on social media, I kind of I'm in this little bubble of sex positivity and amazing women doing this incredible work for other women, and posts are getting put up which are really amazing posts emphasizing the beauty of the feminine and the beauty of feminine energy. And I really wanted to echo that and be a voice for the masculine, and the sacred masculine, this divine masculine, this healthy masculine, the mature, healthy, is really beautiful and really potent and really powerful, but seems to be, I don't know, the masculinity in general is kind of a bit hostile. It's a bit, and even other guys. I've had other guys come to me and say, we're not sure you're doing this and why you're putting stuff out there and speaking up as a guy. And it's like, well, because I'm proud of being a guy. I was born a guy. I identify as a guy, and I'm happy, with the fact that I identify as a guy. And there's nothing wrong with, being proud of who you are and taking, which I think is really, really important. It's the message that's kind of coming through is taking ownership and responsibility of your actions and who you identify as a person, and being proud of that and being happy with that. So I really want to be a voice for the healthy, respectable, responsible. We use the word sacred and divine, and that language kind of puts some people off, but that's really what it is. It's this healthy, mature, sacred masculine energy. I wanted to try and be at least a bit of a mouthpiece for that, and show and be an example to other guys who are kind of maybe worried about how they're coming across as men, or how they're coming across with their masculinity, and say, look, it's okay to be masculine and to identify as a masculine person. Make sure that you're doing it healthily, doing it maturely, doing it respectably. So that was really my intention and my drive for putting that post up there in the first place.
Yeah, I'm just getting little snippets of, wisdom coming through. I think the internet is breaking up a little bit. Can anyone that's watching confirm that you can hear Cam well, or are we having a connection issue? Because I don't want to miss any of this valuable information that he's sharing with us. Can anyone let me know, either Ken or
Um,
Camelia? Are you able to hear him clearly? Because I'm not able to.
yeah, I can hear you pretty clearly.
Hey, Jenny, thanks for joining. Mostly okay, so you can mostly hear him. Great. Okay, great. So I can mostly hear him too. Okay, good. It's okay. Great. We're gonna make do. We will make this happen. Fantastic. Yeah. What I was getting from you in some of that conversation was what, like, really true powerful masculinity means, and I've been sharing some of your wisdom leading up to tonight's conversation. And you talked about masculinity being a real embodiment of actual vulnerability, an understanding and connection to your emotional well-being, a connection to your emotions. And one thing that actually Ken brought up leading up to our conversation today is, in an environment that feels very angry right now, how are men able to show up in a way that they can be part of the conversation, so they can still express how they're feeling, express their confusion, and have the safe space in order to do that? Like, the feedback that I'm getting from a lot of men is that they're scared to even participate in the conversation because it's feeling like they can't do anything right. So, what would be your advice to someone in the environment that is coming to a head because there is a shift in power, how they can start being part of the conversation?
Mm. Yeah, it's a really powerful question. I think um, the first step to being involved in any conversation is really owning your position in that conversation. So if you're like if you're coming in not knowing and being confused and being kind of confronted, it's being upfront and open about that. You know, it's showing some integrity and being like, look, this is what I'm, you know, where I'm at, what I'm doing. You know, I'm confused. I'm not really sure how to enter and participate in this conversation. I would love to be involved, but I'm not sure. So I think that needs to be the first step. Is if guys are willing and wanting and open to be, participants in this conversation, they'd be like, okay, look, I'm open to being a part of it, but I'm not sure what my role or position is, and they need to be comfortable with that. You know, it's not a comfortable thing to, especially for men and for people just in general, to be open about the fact that they are not sure what to do with their life. You know, it's not something we like to admit in our society, in our culture, is that we're unsure of things and we're insecure and we're vulnerable. But being upfront about that when you step into a conversation and being like, look, this is really love to be a part of. I'm not sure how to do that, or I'm not sure what steps to take to be a part of it. Can you please help me, or can you please facilitate, me being a part of this conversation? I would love to try and get involved, because you know, that whole that whole process of being open, that whole process of being honest and being insecure and being vulnerable, um, that's healing in itself. You know, that's tapping into this this vulnerability that we have, that we don't really like to express, that we like to hide behind. We like to put on these masks, think that we're that everything's okay and that we don't need to have these conversations, when really it's all about making sure that we acknowledge those feelings but still actively try and participate in the overcoming or the healing of them as well. So yeah, my advice would be to, if you're feeling vulnerable, insecure, think about that and express it in a way that's respectful. It's always coming back to a really simple way is using I statements rather than you statements. So I feel this, I feel vulnerable, I feel a bit insecure, not you're making me feel this way, not pointing the finger. So it's that's really like some really basic, simple advice for anyone trying to get involved in any type of conversation that they're not sure about how to, is just be open and upfront about the fact that you're pretty vulnerable.
Yeah, maybe a better question for me to have asked, and I appreciate that answer, is how do you prepare yourself maybe to be part of that conversation? Because if going in you're feeling defensive or triggered, and this goes for women as well, what is that an invitation for us to do personally so that we can actually participate in the conversation from a place of wanting to develop understanding and a relationship as opposed to being in reaction?
Mm.
So
So
maybe
I guess
let's
the answer
shift
to
it
that
to actually
is
having a discussion. Oh,
no, no,
to
go for
maybe
it, go
having
for
a
it.
discussion about what personal power is and how sexuality ties into that.
Yeah, definitely. So the first step to that is education. So I think I'll go out on a limb here and say that a lot of people entering into conversations, specifically around gender and power, from a little bit of ignorance, thinking that their own um, self-knowledge is enough to go in and start talking about all these things, when um, really you need to do some reading and you need to do some fact checking and some finding, and it's all well and good to just jump into a conversation and throw some buzzwords and some keywords and get some shock reactions out of people, but then you're speaking from reaction, right? You're not speaking from education, from some integrity and some honesty. So that's the first thing, and that's the key, is to just be educated and just to educate yourself. Again, we live in a society where really it's not really encouraged to ask questions. It's not really encouraged to do our own research. We see something on the news and then we jump straight into a conversation with someone and say, "Oh, I know this for a fact because we saw it on the news. We saw it in an article or in a post that someone put up," and we don't think to go and fact check that person. Um, Problematic. So the first thing is to really educate yourself, and sexuality and gender. We have to look at the fact that men are disproportionately perpetrators of sexual violence and sexual assault, and something that bugs me, just as a guy as well, is when this conversation is kind of happening, we start talking about the fact that women are predominantly the victims or the sufferers of sexual assault. A lot of people start bringing up, a lot of guys anyway, start bringing up, "Oh, it's also it's also happening to men. It's also happening to men. Why aren't you talking about men?" I'm like, yeah, well, it is also happening to men, not to the same scale, for starters. And for secondly, it's someone who I respect quite a lot said to me, it's not necessarily about looking um, at the victims, of the sufferers of sexual assault, but of the perpetrators. And overwhelmingly, perpetrators are men. So even if it is a male or a man getting assaulted, the perpetrator is more often than not, in fact, way more often than not, another man. So just that fact alone needs to be like talked about a bit more. Yes, victims come in all shapes and sizes, are men. So that's something that bugs me, is when people bring up that this idea that we're not talking about men as victims, and it's like, well, let's talk about perpetrators, not victims. Let's shift that dynamic. And yes, it's important to acknowledge people that have suffered, but we're really trying to hit the nail on the head and target some perpetrators, and the perpetrators are male, so men.
Yeah, I've got a bit of delay on my end and you're chopping up, but I want to, if everyone else can hear Cam clearly, I want to carry on so that we can continue this conversation. And I know an hour is not going to be long enough for us, Cam, so we might have to hop on again if you're game. In doing some of my
Yeah, we'll
reading
try better
leading
next
up
time.
to our conversation today, um, I listened to a video that Esther Perel spoke specifically to this topic that we're speaking about tonight. And I loved the context in which she put power. She said there's really kind of two kinds. There's power two, which is empowerment within yourself, a connection to self, an honoring of self, which, as I understand it, is a lot of what you are teaching people, that connection between the mind, spirit, and body. And then there's power over, which is actually even less about sex, but more about a form of humiliation, of domination, of oppression, and less about sex and more about violence, actually, which I think is what leads to these situations where men are disconnected from understanding really what power means. I almost want to say it's like a dysmorphia in a way. So where does the imbalance begin? I know that we're influenced by our culture and how we are raised. Our parents certainly play a part as well. But I want to talk about really in your wheelhouse, the disconnection between sort of the mind, spirit, and body in an understanding of what sex and power actually means. And then have you speak to how someone starts to first be curious about where that disconnection lies. Because when you've been raised a certain way and told a certain thing for so long, where does the cue come in that something's wrong, that you are misusing your own personal power, especially when it comes to your sex? And in addition to that, because I want you to talk about this for a little bit, is how does one begin the journey in making that connection between those parts of ourselves where that disconnection lies? Let me know if that translates to a question that that you can understand. I'm trying the thoughts in my head and what
Definitely.
I'm trying to contribute to you.
Yeah, cool. So there's a bit to unpack there. I'll kind of talk into it a little bit, I think. So we first need to acknowledge that sex and sexuality and power are kind of inextricably linked. You know, there's power in both the masculine and there's power in the feminine as well. You know, and there's and I don't mean necessarily men and in the this spectrum that masculinity and femininity kind of operate on. And there's power in expressing that and being comfortable in expressing those things, and those things that link to sexuality. So yeah, when we start looking at sex and power, it's not like saying, oh, okay, sex is over here and power's over here in a different base camp. I think the two are very linked, and it's it's easier said than done to bring those two together into a really nice cohesive whole. So when we start looking at like the stories and the myths and the scripts, really the narratives that society tell ourselves, is that power is action and sexuality is and eroticism and and they kind of put these two things in base camps and they have nothing to do with one another. That's kind of what society and the stories that we tell ourselves make us believe. First, I guess the first step on this whole journey of bridging those two worlds is really understanding that, or starting to understand that we can have those two things working together, and that we can be empowered, and that can be sexually expressive, and that can be powerful. And this idea that power isn't just aggression and violence and dominance, and that sexuality isn't just intercourse and eroticism, and that they share characteristics. There's this nice fluid movement between the two. So I guess speaking from like personal experience and speaking from, you know, lived experiences as a man who identifies as a man, the stories that society tells me and tells us as a group is that it's okay for us to express power, and it's okay for us to express power in those narrowly defined ways, you know, through violence, through aggression, through anger, right? So guys are generally taught not to, you know, this whole idea of guys not crying, of not expressing any type of emotion that could be considered feminine, because feminine, when you're a man or when you're in your masculine, is negative, quote unquote negative. So, and then, you know, vice versa, at least, the, you know, women of society essentially are told, or are fed this narrative, I suppose, of them expressing sexuality. You know, sexuality is something that's appropriate for a woman to express, but not for a man to express, and that women are fed the narrative that, or that it's not powerful, and that it can't show anger and aggression. And again, you know, we're creating a divide, and this divisive nature is so. Yeah, it's really about creating new scripts and new stories, I suppose, and challenging these old paradigms, this old paradigm of masculinity, this old paradigm of femininity. Again, we use these languages and these words. They create a divide. Again, they create divisiveness. So it's all about like making things more appropriate and accessible and easier to do. You know, so this whole narrative and conversation for men specifically is what I feel comfortable tapping into, those deeper emotions, those emotions that they may have considered inappropriate because they were too feminine. You know, it's allowing themselves to feel vulnerable. It's allowing themselves to feel the shame. You know, there's so much shame for men, and so it's about tapping into that and allowing them to express it, you know, in other ways that isn't just anger and violence. You know, that's the stuff that they've been told is okay for them to do, but there's other ways of expressing those things, and there's other ways that you're able to process these emotions. So that's a lot of the work that I do with men, is just really educating them around the fact that this is the narrative you've been told, and this is a narrative you're telling yourself. Really, it's time to challenge that and outside the box. You know, you can do other things, and it's okay for you to do other things, and it's appropriate for you to do other things, and express yourself in different ways. And then that leads itself into sexuality as well.
I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Ken's post. Sorry, Cam, I just want to there's still a bit of a delay. I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to acknowledge Ken's post. He says, as far as I can tell, I'm the only man at this event besides the guest. I'm not a predator. I'm very empathetic to the respect and honor of women. How can we shift this conversation to men who are good and not all part of the sexual abuse that is so prevalent? But we still find ourselves at the short end of the stick when it comes to relationships with women. So we're happy to talk about that, Ken, but at the same time, I also want to address where this disparity happens. And if you're in the practice of being a good man, how you can come to the table to have a discussion, much like you have today, in order to bridge that gap and create more understanding. Now, I know that you had shared earlier that coming to that table, the proverbial table, if you will, can be frightening at times. And I know that there's a discussion, and the purpose of this interview tonight is to create a space where people can have that kind of dialogue and feel that they can be safe to do so. I also want to take a moment to address what good man, a definition, is going around right now. And then, Cam, I want to come to you and ask the question about what you feel the definition of a powerful man, and maybe even a good man, is in today's modern age. Glennon Doyle on Instagram was speaking to what her definition of a good man is that someone that doesn't do these things and misuse their own personal power, their own sexual power, but also is someone who is supporting women in this cultural shift, and, to be perfectly honest, power shift, in saying that when things that are said that are inappropriate, that you're not participant and that you're actually holding other people to account. She shared an experience where she was in a barber shop with her daughter, and the men in the shop were having a discussion about their opinions around their disbelief of Dr. Ford's contribution to the, yes, as Jenny has said, allyship, to her contribution to the testimony that she gave, and said that they thought she was lying. And when she spoke up and addressed and stated statistical facts as to actually why she would be telling the truth, and when she left the barbershop, the proprietor came out and apologized that that's typically not the conversation, and that he doesn't feel the same way as the men in the shop. And her call to him was, if you don't, then what we need from good men like you is to actually speak up and address those issues, so that we are working together to help shift this power dynamic, this old paradigm that you spoke to earlier. So let me ask you, Cam, what do you think a powerful man is? And what is your definition of a good man as well? Because I think it's powerful to hear that from a man, especially one that does the work that you're doing in this day and age. What does that look like to you?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So firstly, I don't think a powerful man and a good man have to be mutually exclusive. I think they can be one and the same. I think a call to action is definitely needed. I think a good man, a good powerful man, is someone who uses his position in society, uses the privileges that he's been given in society to speak up against things that he considers immoral, or things that he considers dishonest, or out of alignment. So we talk about Carl Jung's archetypes, and the archetype of the warrior, this person who, or this masculine figure who's not there to start a fight, but he's there to stand up for the things that he believes in. So if you truly believe that, things that are happening are wrong and that they go against your moral code, instead of going out and proclaiming your innocence, proclaiming your respect and love for people and for women, take action. There's a difference between word, and word can be powerful, but there's a lot more power, I believe, in action, and speaking out against some people that might be using their word, and they might be speaking what they truly believe. But if you truly believe in something that's different, then it's your obligation as the warrior, as that good, powerful man, to speak up against it.
Wonderful. I love that. Jenny says a conscious man is the most powerful man. A conscious woman is the most powerful woman. Our awareness is our superpower. Did you want to extend on that at all? Because I know this is deeply seated in a lot of the work that you do.
Yeah, I mean, consciousness, this whole idea of being aware, and this is where education starts, and this is where doing the work, really shifts that consciousness, so we can start to become, aware of things that we were just taking for granted. We didn't have to think about it because we've been privileged enough to not have to worry about it. This is the whole idea of where I think the nuances and subtleties of this quote unquote idea of privilege comes in. Is if you've never had to worry about this, that's something you've been privileged to not have to worry about. So it's start to do some education around that, and feel into and think about people who are in different situations than you. Again, that's this idea of showing empathy, showing authenticity, showing integrity, and showing vulnerability. This is what consciousness is.
Wonderful. I just want to make sure that I don't miss this. Jenny has added what Ken has very generously shared in his opinion is, I'd like to add, what role can men play in the healing of the collective? Do you want to speak to that for both Ken and Jenny?
Yeah, of course. So before you start healing other people, you have to do healing for yourself. You know, this I love cliches because there's so much truth in cliches. You can't love another person truly until you truly love yourself. You know, so that's what needs to happen. You know, before men and the masculine start thinking about healing the rest of society, the society they consider to be broken, they need to do some inner work and some inner healing, and that's the best. Well, maybe not the best, but that's the most effective and the first step, I suppose, in healing the collective, is doing work on themselves. You know, leading by example, speaking out against things. You know, doing this stuff for themselves that then ripples outwards and affecting their community. You know, you can't change the world, but you can change your world. And if you change your world, and every individual person is doing that, collectively we'll start to see a shift.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I want to open the floor to everyone that's watching. Now is your opportunity to ask Cam some more questions. It doesn't specifically need to be about men. It can be about women as well. But on this topic about really, maybe I was even playing it safe with the title, gender and personal power. Maybe it is about like our sex and personal power, whatever it is that you identify with. We're shifting out of this old paradigm, and it's making a lot of us uncomfortable. And the whole purpose of the conversation tonight is to provide an opportunity for us to have an open discussion where hopefully everyone feels safe to ask the questions that maybe in your everyday doesn't feel so safe, and where to even start and how you can contribute. I love the point that Cam makes about it's really about starting with ourselves and our own inner work. And what's come up as I'm speaking is I want to speak to you about that if certain things are triggering you, what is that an invitation for? But before I do that, I want to just see what Ken has had to share here. I agree with Cam. One clarifying point, I'm not frightened, nor do I feel vulnerable. I live a certain kind of way because I believe it's the right way to live. My frustration is in the experience and observation there is little benefit with women to being a good man outside of doing it for its own sake. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. So there'll be, I guess there's a little bit going on there. This idea of like not feeling vulnerable and not feeling afraid, not feeling scared, like that's a beautiful thing. But there are a lot of people out there that, you know, that do feel that, and maybe that they don't know that they feel that. You know, they kind of feel that something's off, something's wrong, but they can't identify it as vulnerability, as they just kind of feel attacked. You know, they don't recognize it as insecurity. So again, it's kind of putting yourself in another person's shoes who might not realize that that's what they're feeling. You know, they might just feel confronted by something, and then they're like, oh, I just feel angry and frustrated, so I'm just going to attack someone else for it. So yeah, this idea of like being a good person just for the sake of being a good person. Yeah, I think the more we start to learn about ourselves, the more we recognize the innate kind of goodness of ourselves as well. You know, the more we start becoming aware of our own personal stories and narratives, the more empathy we develop. Firstly, for ourselves, recognize, oh, we, you know, might have gone through this, or you might have gone through that. And then that starts to open up the floor for us feeling empathy for other people as well. So I think, yeah, there's some value in like faking it till you make it. Like if you're, you know, if you're just going to be a good person just for the sake of, you know, or just because it's the right, you know, thing, or society tells you it's the right thing to just be a good person, then go ahead. But I can guarantee that if you start doing the work properly and authentically, then you'll start to develop that true sense of empathy and start really becoming aware and start really becoming, you know, conscious. This word consciousness again popping up. So yeah, that's, I don't know if that was speaking into that question or that statement, but yeah, that's what I'm feeling.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Ken, you can let us know. What I would offer is that that we should be ideally doing our work to the benefit of us. And when we do that, it always ends up benefiting those around us. So if the intention behind it is to have an effect on either women or men in your life, and a frustration lies there, perhaps the invitation is to think about how it just solely benefits you, and then you see everything else kind of rise around you and through doing that. Because much like in my own work, if you're doing the work to get a relationship, you're going to struggle in your own work. It's got to be about coming into union and relationship with yourself, and then the relationship finds you. And I think that's a lovely sort of connection to this conversation. Is what I would hope most that people take away from tonight's conversation is to get reflective about your own personal power and what that means to you, and how you want to participate in this conversation, and how you want to contribute. Now, before I let you go anywhere, Cam, and I always have 3 questions at the end of a talk for my guest, I do want to address when we're feeling triggered, as we make this important cultural shift, what is that a personal invitation for us, and where can we start looking to support ourselves when we're in that state or feeling that way?
Yeah, well, something that I always tell the people that I work with when they're feeling something come up for them is to stop, to just take yourself away from whatever is, causing this, and do some work internally. So do some, I teach yoga, so it's do some deep breathing, do some meditating, do some self-reflecting, do some introspection, and maybe try and elucidate the reason why this is popping up for you. There's no, there is some value in like navigating that and delving deep into it and doing some, really psychoanalytic work. But if you're able to just allow it to come and express and surrender into that through slowing down, through breathing, you'll start to notice reasons why, and start to notice patterns and why this is coming up for you, I suppose. So yeah, that's an invitation to slow down and reflect and introspect.
Wonderful. Yeah. Self-reflect before reacting. I love that. I love that. Was there anyone else that was wanting to ask Cam a question before I start to wrap things up tonight? This is a big topic, and I think it's one we will be addressing again. I really want to be participant in providing the platform for people to feel that they can show up and ask the tough questions and be able to share from a place of vulnerability, which is a superpower, by the way, so that we can be contributing in our own way to supporting each other, both men and women, or however you identify, in making this shift. So let's see. Ken says, you all make some great points. Thank you for that. I do think an area for growth for me is to simply do good for its own sake and not expect others to return to me in kind. That's a great place to start, Ken. Thank you so much for sharing that. So what I'll do is, if you have any other questions as I dive into the last 3 for Cam in our talk, feel free to pop them in there. We'll try and answer them before I let him go. If not, we'll be sure to answer them underneath in the comments as you post them. So Cam, what I like to do at the end of every conversation is ask 3 questions. And then we're going to share with everybody how they can find you. I know I already follow you on Instagram, which is great, but I know you've shared some other links, so we'll make those available to people as well if you want to continue the conversation with Cam and learn more about what he does. So my first question to you is, and it's a doozy, is what do you know, with all the work that you've done and in your own experience right now in this day and age, to be your biggest truth or the biggest truth?
The biggest truth, my biggest truth, is that there's a shift happening, that there is work that's being done both internally and collectively to to change things, to change our stories. Yeah, I definitely know that's happening.
Wonderful, and grateful for it.
Mm.
And thank you for contributing to supporting people in that shift and change. I also love to leave things on a high vibe, and gratitude is a great way to do that. What are 3 things that you are most grateful for right now?
Right now, I'm grateful for my health. I'm in good standing, which is good. I'm grateful for my my partner. She's a really amazing support for me, especially at the man. I'm also grateful for the platform, actually, the platform to talk about this, to be opened and received and challenged, even to try and talk about this, to give voice to it. So I'm really grateful and thankful to people like yourself for having platforms like this to get this conversation out into the world.
Wonderful, and thank you for being here. And finally, I'll leave on a high point. Love Talks is all about deepening love in our lives. Can you give me what your description of love is?
Oh, just a nice, easy question.
Yeah.
I guess this is so synchronicitous because I had a conversation with a really lovely older Italian gentleman the other day, and we were talking about love, and really we came to the conclusion that there are no words for love. Love is an experience. Love is experiential, and you can try and label it and define it and put these words to it, but really you innately know, you can feel it. It's a feeling, it's an experience. So that's, for me, that's what love is this inner knowing, this inner experience, this inner feeling that you have, that there's no point trying to describe, there's no point trying to label, because you'll do it an injustice. So that's, for me, that's what love is, this inner experience. Yeah.
That's a wonderful description. Thank you for that. Cam, what are you up to next? Now, I know you're all the way over in Perth, Australia, but how can people in different parts of the world find you and participate in what you're offering?
Yeah, no worries. So my personal Instagram is at Cam Fraser 400, and that's got all my updates on it. I also drop like little posts with some random wisdom and stuff around men's health, which is what I'm super passionate about. I'll be traveling to New Zealand later this year to do some workshops over there. I'll also be offering a whole bunch of stuff online next year. So that's the big push, is to try and put some stuff online for people to participate in, and to share the knowledge, the little bit of knowledge that I have.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us tonight. I really appreciate you coming on. We had some challenges in the beginning, but we carried through, and I think it was to the benefit of everybody. Just come back to America, says Michael. You've got a fan that wants you to come back to the States. That's great.
I'll be there one day. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. And hopefully here in Canada as well. Thank you so much for your time today, Cam. And we'll stay in touch. If you have any questions, have those aha moments, or wait, I wish I asked this after we have wrapped, don't worry, you can post them underneath the video here, and either Cam or I will address them for you. Thanks so much for watching tonight, everybody, and look forward to the next episode of Love Talks in November. Good night.